In this presentation, you will meet Jamaie Shapard, who is the founder of Productivity Wisdom and works with one-on-one with people to help them pursue their creative passion in life. She is the mother of 4 young men who she homeschooled for 20 years. Let's enjoy her presentation.
Hello, everybody out there in Cyberland. I'm so excited to be here. I want to thank Kohila. I think this is awesome that she's put this Getting It Together Summit for parents out there. We just really needed something like this in the world. So I just want to start off by just appreciating her and thanking her for doing this, especially for making something like this available for free for people this week. So thanks a lot. And what she asked me to talk about is one of the things that I teach about, and I teach about creativity because I believe that it's absolutely the antidote for fear. And by the end of this talk, I want to get to a place where I can talk to you about how you can use fear, which is very uncomfortable, and use the discomfort that comes from that fear to actually find out what your homeschooling why is. So before I do that, I just want to talk about that big thing, that thing called fear, because fear is something that has just grabbed a hold of the whole world right now. It's like fear has cast out this huge net across the world, and it's really affected us because we have all kinds of things that are happening to us because of it. Kids have been sent home to school all over the world. So they're home with their parents. Some of the parents have been laid off. And talk about an avalanche of emotion that could come from something like that. I mean, it's huge. Because the schools closed, what that did is it created the largest homeschooling movement the world never could have imagined. So here it is. Here we are, all kinds of parents in every walk of life having to do school at home. And if you're watching this right now, you're thinking about, the fall. I know that your world has probably been turned completely upside down by the pandemic, and especially by having to jump into something as daunting as is what homeschooling can be, because teaching really matters and what your kids need really matters. As the schools are maybe opening up in your area in the fall, what I hear is all kinds of things from parents. There's anger that they've got to make a decision at all. There's sadness, like why is this happening? I don't know that I'm capable of doing it. There's fear. What if this happens? What if that happens? All kinds of things. And I actually, I really kind of like to lean into this. In this book that I wrote, I actually have a character, and she was in the middle of some fear and some places where she really felt like a victim. And the antidote in this fictional book was for her to find out what her creativity was. So I really am passionate about creativity being a solution when someone has been turned into a victim. And I was talking to a good friend of mine who for decades has been a therapist. So she really knows her stuff. And I got a lot of confirmation because that friend of mine, she sent me a book. And in this book, it was written similar to mine. It was in a novel form. But in this book, The Power of TED, which was an acronym for the empowerment dynamic, in that book, the author had the same conclusion. He used this thing called the Karpman drama triangle. And in the Karpman drama triangle, there was a victim, just like what I had written about, just like what I try to help people get out of. So it was a huge confirmation. And in the book, the opposite of being a victim was creator. And if you're teaching, you got to be creative. You got to be a creator. So I want to take a look at that. Now, I changed it a little bit, And I decide to call it, instead of the drama triangle, which there is a lot of drama, I'm going to call it the fear triangle. But it's really, I'm borrowing from some other people who've done a lot of research in this area and studied it. And in the fear triangle, there is a victim. And then the victim has been made a victim because there is a persecutor, and then there's always a rescuer. And it creates this cycle of drama, this triangle of drama. Now, the persecutor doesn't have to be a human, it can be something like the pandemic. So you might be feeling like a victim, your kids might be feeling like a victim, and there was a pandemic and you had to, the schools had some support maybe where you were at, or maybe you got some books, you had something that had to rescue. And maybe with the fall coming, we're looking for someone to rescue us from this drama triangle, from this fear that we're in, because we've had to jump into the homeschooling movement. Now, I have been an entrepreneur for most of my life, and I homeschooled for about half of my life. And some of the things that were entrepreneurial in me really overlapped and linked in with my homeschooling. And when you're an entrepreneur, when you have a business, there's usually a problem that has to be solved. So I can really relate to this triangle, because I like to, when there is a problem, a victim, I like to solve it. So my first fear triangle, it wasn't because of the pandemic. I started years ago, but I had something in my life that led to some drama. So back in 2012, we had franchises that we had, and we had some sandwich shops, and circumstances out of our control caused those to be shut down. And when they were shut down, we had to keep going. So it was kind of like our little pandemic back then. We had lost our jobs, and so we had to get creative, and we had to make some changes. So my husband crawled out on the roof of our restaurant, and he took the letters from the sign and he rearranged them, and we changed from being our franchise name on the building to, we just changed it to Zion Sub. And we just kind of had to do our own thing, make our own sandwiches, finish our lease. And then at the end of it, we still needed to figure out how we were going to do it. So when we were done, kind of like you may have been done with this little round of homeschooling, and now you're heading into what are we going to do next and making decisions, we decided to keep going with restaurants. But we took what we had, and we actually got a lot of rescuers. There were 67 people that helped us, and we had to think outside the box, and we took all the pieces from our franchise and we reconstructed it, and we made it into a restaurant that we named Shep Southside. Now, we ended up having to close that restaurant in 2014, did some other things, but it still has a following if you want to look it up online. But I learned so much from that, because we went from something that we were used to, something where we had a lot of support with our franchise, and we were thrown into having to do it on our own. Now, I think the tools that I got to be able to do that, I didn't get those from business school. I didn't get those from my communication classes in college. I got those because if you rewind another 10 years earlier, we had another pandemic in our life. We had another fear triangle. And that fear triangle was called dyslexia. We were raising boys. Our boys were in school. And the second one, chance. Everyone could use a second chance. And chance did give us a second chance. His dyslexia fell upon us, and it threw us into chaos. And I want to show you just why. If you take a look at this one, you can probably see, here's a picture of Chance with his brother and some of his cousins, and you can see exactly what the schools were dealing with. So we had a little ball of energy. And he had spelling problems at school. he just couldn't quite spell anything. We worked and we worked and we worked. He was constantly in trouble. The teachers were ready to make the rescuer be meds. And so we had to do like a lot of parents had to do during this pandemic. We just brought him home, and we had to do something totally different. And it worked pretty decently with the one, and then eventually we brought our others. We had a baby at home, and then we brought our other 3 boys at home. So we ended up in what was another fear triangle, and that was having to homeschool 4 boys. And that just was like the fear triangle on steroids for our lives. All kinds of things were difficult at that point. So this drama triangle on steroids with my boys. We would have arguments about how stupid the English language was because none of the phonics rules were following the rules. We would have boys that would stand on their heads when I'd try to read or when we'd try to do school, and pretty much everybody was allergic to pencils and paper. Just everyone. And if you've got boys, you may have experienced that. I really needed this book at that point in my life. This is one that my mom used to read to me when I was a kid, and I read lots of books, but I almost needed this one for me, the little engine that could. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. It was hard. And so what do you do with boys when you bring them home? If you've been out in the pandemic, you've probably had to, let's go outside and we'll just go for a walk. So at that time, we didn't have a pandemic, so I was able to put my boys in the car, and we went to open gym day. And we had this wonderful gym class at one of the churches, and really it was just a place to let them all run around and blow off some steam, play with some balls, and it also helped satisfy our PE credit that we needed for our homeschooling. But while I was there, I would sometimes meet other women, and I had this wonderful opportunity to sit next to this woman who had 3 kids that were also playing in the gym. And while I was sitting there talking to her, she was a little bit older than me, I found out that this was not her first rodeo. She actually had done this homeschooling thing before. She had 3 older kids that were off getting doctorates and in veterinary school, and they were just doing great. And she had homeschooled them. They were a very academic family, and I thought, oh my gosh, am I lucking out today, because I am going to pick this woman's brain that's sitting next to me. How did she do it? She's already done it with 3. She's got 3 more, and she's going to do it again. I need to know. Tell me what the secret is. Well, what was funny is when she told me her secret, she just looked me right in the eye and she said, "Live your life." Wow, that was not really all that helpful. So I went home, and we had a directory that all of the homeschool parents were listed in our area, and most of them would also list what curriculum they were using. So I thought, this is going to help me. I'm going to find out what she does, what she uses, how she got those first 3 as successful as she did. What is the secret? And then I found out that her curriculum secret was books and outdoors. Wow, it was pretty simple. So live my life, books and outdoors. Oh my gosh, talk about some fear. How am I going to figure this homeschool thing out? How are we going to get this thing under control? And then another story happened, another thing happened. And this was where my youngest, he was about 2 or 3, and he sort of became a victim that day. He had gotten into the kitchen, and he'd gotten out all the pots and pans, and he had gotten the stock pot, and he had put himself into the stock pot. And he was just sitting in the middle of my floor with his feet sticking out. And I think he felt stuck, kind of like I had felt stuck. So there he was. And I got an idea. And I said, Javen, go get the spoon. Chance, get that pepper grinder. And Kale, I want you to grab the salt shaker. And I ran and I grabbed the camera. And I said, put your brother on the stove. Now, we did not turn the stove on. But here is what we came up with once I jumped up onto the cabinet. And I just kind of leaned into it. And we had our little homeschool cooking 101. This picture ended up in all of my boys' slideshows for their homeschool graduations. So I think this is what kind of saved us. We got creative that day and we just had fun. And we took some pictures. We did some art that day with our homeschooling 101 picture. And that just kind of changed things. So we had flipped our triangle. The victim had now become creator, and instead of being persecuted, we were ready for a challenge. And instead of fixing and rescuing, we could just coach. And so here is this triangle again, and we flipped it the other way. And that day was kind of a turning point with my son in the stock pot and learning to become creators. We became delight driven in our homeschooling. And instead of solving problems, we would just have visions and we'd have dreams and we'd have ideas. And I became a challenger. Instead of the homeschooling being a persecution, we had challenges and we got motivated and we inspired and we encouraged each other. And I became more of a facilitator than having to worry about being an all-out teacher. And I just created a space for learning. And here's where I got some of my tips. This had been done before, years ago. I think it was maybe even 100 years earlier, and you can look this woman up. But Charlotte Mason, she kind of did the same thing. And I think my friend who said books and outdoors, she must have studied Charlotte Mason as well. So I wanted to share this slide with you because Charlotte Mason had put together a method using real living books, like this book. And we had lots and lots of other books that we used. So instead of textbooks, we did a lot of reading. We went outside and we explored. We played swords in the backyard, get a hula hoop and put it in the grass and dig through and find bugs and things. And we just became very delight driven in what we did. So we had flipped our triangle. We had flipped the fear triangle and we had become creative with a creative triangle. And some of these kinds of tools helped us. These are some of the other things that we found that were really helpful. And you might want to look these up. I love the Timberdoodle catalog. That's where I found a lot of these things. I could put myself under an avalanche of ideas. So this really simplified things for me for science and history. We listened to history as a story. And my kids know history way better than I had learned it when I was back in school. We were able to learn things similar to like what Kohila does with math and gives Piggy full confidence. We used things that were very tactile, so we were able to touch and see our math. I actually made a whole bunch of pieces with my kids. My dyslexic son, when we could make our letters tactile and each of these characters actually represented something, we were able to use that. I used Alphabet Island, and we found a wonderful video series that taught writing, Institute for Excellence in Writing. Andrew Pudwa, totally my hero. He solved the allergic to pens, pencils, and paper problem that we had in our homeschool. So there were all kinds of resources that were there, all kinds of things to flip our drama triangle, flip our fear, and help us to become delight-driven, to become creative. And then I'm just going to kind of show you, because sometimes you just need to peek into the future like I did in the gym that day. My friend, she had these kids that had made it, and they were okay, and they were successful. So those kids that you saw in the kitchen, in the homeschool cooking 101, they're big now, So I just threw some pictures up here real quick of my kids. I have my oldest son, Javen, who's a programmer now. He's also a wonderful musician. I've got the second one, the one that was dyslexic. He ended up becoming really geeky with trigonometry, became a precision machinist through the state technical college, and is really successful there. My oldest son, or my last son is really into animals. So I've got a picture of him at the zoo. He's still finishing up school. And then my third son, he is actually an actor out in LA. So they all made it, and we weren't perfect. We had to use what tools we had. We had to use the personalities that we had and the things that we had. But the bottom line is we lived our life, and they will make it. And I want to circle back to what I had talked about, at the beginning, because we started off talking about fear and how that fear affects us and how there's all these feelings, and you may have some decisions to make. And I just wanted to let you know that if you've got kids, the kids that you have, you are absolutely 100% the best teacher that those kids could have. Your kids will have an IEP, an individualized education plan, because you're going to become a student of your kids. You know what they need, you know what their challenges are, and you will figure it out. You'll take the pictures, you'll find the books, you'll be like the I Think I Can and the little engine that could. You'll figure it out. Those kids were designed for you, and you were designed for them. I don't care if they're bio kids or adopted kids, you will figure it out, and you will be able to do it. So let's dig in just a little bit more, because I want to leave you with something, because you might be at a place where you've got to make a decision. And I want you to be able to dig in. I want you to think about, this net of fear that's been cast your direction. And use it. If you need to, close your eyes, because I want you to really just think right now. What has this fear, this pandemic, and all these circumstances done to you? You probably got some feelings going on, and your feelings are just like lights, just like in the dashboard of your car. And they pop on, and they give us some clues, and they make us aware, and they help us to do what we need to get on our way. So I want you to think about, what kinds of feelings are you experiencing? So when these feelings start welling up, just like those lights on the dashboard of your car, I want you to start thinking about them. If you're feeling sadness, know that that is a great emotion for connection. And so your why in your homeschooling is going to be about connecting. If you're feeling anger as that fear comes over you, that is a really great change emotion. And so what your homeschooling why is all about is change. If you're feeling confused, that is a great emotion for getting us to ask questions. So you're going to dig in deep, and that's your why, is questions and learning. If you're having doubt, that's a great breeding ground for humility, and humility breeds confidence. So you're going to be able to find your why by looking at the negative emotions that well up inside of you when you think about, should I homeschool? Am I good enough? You're absolutely the right person to educate your kids. The tools are available. We have the information age. There are people in your world, like that woman that I sat next to in the gym, that will come along beside you and help you. And there's people like Kohila that are out there to help you. So I want you to think about that. Come up with your why and get your confidence on, and know that you choosing to homeschool and you working with your kids is going to be not just a way to school your kids, it's going to be a lifestyle in this new age that's going to allow you and your kids to live your life. And while you're doing that, don't forget also to model creativity and take care of yourself, because your kids are going to be learning from you as you're at home. So make sure while you're living your life with your kids that you're living your life too, because that's just as important. So that's all I've got for today. I know you're going to make the right decision no matter what you do. All good parents homeschool their kids. Some do it full time, some do it part-time. So even if you use the schools, you're still going to be involved. So make it a great day. Be a great homeschooler. Before I leave, I just want to say I'm Jamaie Shapard. And if you'd like some resources online with what I do, you can visit my website, productivitywisdom.com, or join us online and join the discussion with what we do with creativity. I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to have a conversation with you. So let's start a conversation and make it a great year.